Hello again, YouTube. It's the Grognard DM, Tad Atkinson, here with another little ramble. I saw on the forums that I follow very recently somebody who put up a post about, people who use pre-generated worlds and pre-published modules. Well, that's just lazy DMing. I take a little issue with that characterization. So I'm going to talk a little bit about world building and, do you run with prepackaged or do you run with your own homebrew? Now, I will start out by saying that I have always, even going back into the day when it was all first edition AD&D, and Menster hadn't even put out the basic box set for TSR with the what became BECMI. The only other thing was the three little booklets that came out in '74 of OD&D, Original Dungeons and Dragons. So I was running AD&D, and I was, at that time in high school, I was very fond of the works of Lloyd Alexander, the Chronicles of Prydain series. Disney tried doing a very bad rendition of the Black Cauldron, which is actually a combination of two of the books. Completely omitted a major character in the series, um, and focused on the protagonist and his friends, of course. But at any rate, it's like based on the Welsh Mabinogion and the Red Book of Wales. So it's based on some very ancient tales, and he just modernized them and made them more fit for juvenile literature. And so my first campaign setting that I wrote up was based on Prydain. Ever since then, I just love world building. I love coming up with various elements to it. I always am kind of thematic in my structuring of a world, and that could probably be another topic about actual world building. I just want to focus primarily for this chat on pre-published versus coming up with your own. One of the advantages of coming up with your own, of course, is that your players won't know what exactly to expect, and so therefore it brings back kind of the magic. Especially those of you that are watching this that are gamers, think back to the very first day. You've just created a character and you're sitting down to play your very first session of D&D, Tunnels and Trolls, whatever your friends were playing. You had no idea how bad an orc was or a goblin. We had folklore with certainly goblins, and we had Tolkien for the orcs, and they seemed to be pretty formidable in Tolkien. So you've got that blend of wonderment and trepidation because you don't know how powerful are these guys really. Is my first adventure going to be a total party kill? Or is this going to be a really easy encounter? You don't know. That uncertainty is kind of part of the magic of the game. So that is certainly one factor in designing your own. Now, the hobby's gone quite a way, grown up quite a ways, along with the rest of us that were kids when it first started 40 years ago. Well, we're all adults now. I just ran a first edition AD&D campaign that lasted about 3 years, from first level until about, I think they finished around 18th level. And it was all in the world of Greyhawk, and it was all pre-published modules. I didn't write my own module a single time for that entire campaign. I came with some unique monsters because they threw me a curveball and summoned, near the end, summoning one of my powerful NPCs to help them fight the evil bad guy. So I came up with somebody that would occupy his attention. But aside from that, it was very easy. And the thing is, first of all, a lot of these people were new to first edition, so they'd heard about Greyhawk, and some of those that had been gamers in later editions, of course, they'd read about Greyhawk and the various deities of Greyhawk, and they knew some of the land names, and of course, some of the modules were classics they'd heard of, like, I guess I ran them through Tomb of Horrors, Ravenloft, Against the Giants, Queen of Demon Web Pits. Yes, I even read that one. If Grislar is watching this one, yeah, I ran Queen of the Demon Web for a group. And also, I started them with Temple of Elemental Evil, which is another huge classic module. So they still had that bit of the wonderment aspect because they didn't know what first edition was like. Even the veteran gamers, they played third edition. I had one player who'd played, I think he started playing with second edition. But for the most part, they knew third edition, and they knew, okay, orcs are pretty minor monsters, but we're first level. We're pretty minor characters. So they didn't know whether later editions had nerfed orcs or built them up. So there was still that uncertainty factor, that newness. Not necessarily the case in all players, but the advantage that pre-published, pre-packaged stuff has. We're grown-ups now. Most of us probably have jobs. We've got families. We have other responsibilities. It's not like back in high school where you get your homework done for the night in about maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. So maybe I'm quick, but it took me about half an hour, 45 minutes to do my homework at night, and that left hours for me to be sitting down and writing things out, coming up with, well, how does this work in this world? I want to do this concept. How can I create a homebrew rule to allow for something like this to happen? Like in the case of Prydain, if you went into the land of Anufin, the dead land, you began to die. It was called the land of the dead for a reason. Only the servants of Auron, based on the Celtic god Arun, were immune to this draining effect, and indeed were sometimes strengthened by it. Cauldron-born, kind of like zombies, only they're more powerful, and their big weakness is the further away they go from the source of their power of Anufin, the weaker they get. But the closer they are, the stronger they get, and of course, you really don't want to fight them in the land of Anufin. So how do I represent all of this in D&D-esque terms? So you have to think about those little elements when you're homebrewing, and it takes time. If you want to do it well so that you're not adjusting it on the fly while you're playing it because it didn't work the way I thought it was going to work, you kind of need to figure that out. And even if you're not tweaking and coming up with all kinds of little homebrew things to match a theme that you're trying to do, you're just creating a world. It's not based on anything. You just want your own world. Okay, how many moons does it have? If it's got one, pretty easy, base it on Earth. But what if it's got two? And now, what if those moons impact magic in some way, shape, or form? Because even in real-world mythology, positive magics in some traditions are stronger during the full and weaker during the new moon, and vice versa. Negative magics are stronger during the new moon and weak during the full. So how do you represent that in your world? And then what are the lunar cycles? Does the moon, does this go with one moon? Does it have a roughly 28-day cycle like ours does, or does it cycle a little bit longer? And what's your calendar year like? Is it 365.25, a little bit more, like our year? Or is it in exact 365, or are you going to do 12 months, 30 days each, so it's 360 days? These are things you've got to think about, and then you've got to kind of plan out the mechanics so you can add all of the little flavor and detail you may want to. And if you're, well, that's more work than I want to, I would submit maybe you don't want to be a DM, because you're the one who paints the picture. You're the one who makes the world come to life for your players. And if you don't want to put that kind of effort into it, well, guess what? There's pre-published campaign settings that did all that work for you. It's not laziness. It is not laziness at all. It's how much time do you have to devote to thinking about things that you probably don't really, or would never think of in the real world, and don't really want to while you're coming up with it. I would submit, if you want to talk about a lazy DM, posters that make these comments. The lazy DM is the one who, because he doesn't want to be lazy and do prepackaged, comes up with his own homebrew and has absolutely no details. doesn't really know what all the gods do. He just came up with a bunch of god names and then maybe some alignments that they follow and a rough sketch of what they control, what are their spheres of influence, their domains of power or whatever. But I would almost lay money down that such DMs do not come up with unique calendar names for each month, day names for each day of the week, and however many days in the week there are, how many months in the year there are. Maybe has a rough history idea so they know roughly what the current year is to start their campaign. But they don't even necessarily think about how many moons are in the sky or how many suns are in the sky. Is it a planet revolving a binary or trinary system? The cosmology of your world is work you should put into it if you want it to come alive for your players. If you're just running hack and slash gaming, then probably you don't need that much detail. But if you have even one player that loves role-playing and wants to interact with every single townsperson they encounter, there is nothing wrong with that. That is how they enjoy the game, and you should be ready to run that. That is laziness, not having that prepared. Doing a homebrew or creating your own world and not having those pertinent details ready to go. Not down to the detail, not down to the tiny specifics about what level are they and what are their stats, but knowing that there are these personalities and what their rough personalities are and what they will react negatively to and what they will react positively to. You don't need die rolls for all of that. The best NPC interactions in town don't roll dice. It's the player saying, "Hey, Mr. Barkeep, I'm a little shy on coin, but I've done all of this for you, and we've got a lot of similar things in it. Can you just kind of like download, open a tab, and then when I come back from the next adventure, I'll pay you off. I'm good for it." And if they've got a history and that player's got reputable, honorable previous encounters with this guy, Barkeep will say, "Yeah, sure, just open the tab, no problem. Pay me when you get back from your next adventure." And if you don't come back from your next adventure, it's going to the bill's going to be tacked on to whoever inherits everything else. Okay? Oh, okay. No die rolls involved. Just interaction. It's enjoyable for the game master too, the dungeon master, Mr. Lazy DM. So give yourself some enjoyment and get to play a character because you don't normally get to do that. So a busy person, prepackaged is great. You can still run the game, and it doesn't take you countless hours to get it ready to go. Sometimes, to be perfectly honest, years. The game that I just started, which is AD&D, my own world, it's completely sandboxed. My map is not filled in. When I go into world building and everything, I'll bring up the map, or at least part of the map, to show you how unfilled it is, because I'm exploring the world at the same time as my players. I have encounters ready to go, depending on terrain types and everything. I've come up with some of those, but I'm not placing them. I'm just winging it as we go through, as they explore, well, what seems like it would be a good place. Pop it down there. And then, of course, I record that. But this particular world I have spent, that is the world of Talav, which was published in Alarms and Journey, the magazine by Dave Johnson Games. Little shout out for you there, Dave. Thank you for publishing my module before it was even, or my campaign before it was even run. But I worked on that for about 2 or 3 years because I'm very busy. I work in the film and entertainment industry, and my days sometimes are 16-hour days, folks. So when you're working, you're busy like stink. You don't have any free time for yourself, and then there's plenty of time when you're not working to do stuff, which is why I still write my own worlds. But the point is, when you're a very busy working adult, especially if you have kids, and especially my age, some of them might be in high school and have sports and dramatics, performing arts, or clubs, or whatever. You've got a lot of time commitments. And at that point, going with a pre-published campaign setting and published modules is not lazy. It's being able to play the game when your free time is at a premium. That is called time management, not laziness. I submit to you as my final comment on this whole debate that true DM laziness is deciding to come up with your own world so you can say, this is my own world, but not coming up with enough of the details. You just got the basic mechanical stuff for rolling dice. And that's it. You have none of the flavor. You have none of the little uh, details that a good role player is going to want to get into to immerse themselves in the game. And you are cheating your players of that enjoyment because it is in part an immersive setting. And all it takes is one player at your table who is a role player rather than a die role player to have that experience spoiled for them because you couldn't be bothered to put in the time to come up with how many months do we have in this year? What day of the week is it? When are the seasons? What season is it right now? What's the history like? I have one player. She's constantly delving into history. Every NPC she runs into that might be a historian, she wants to sit down and talk with them for a long time to figure out what happened before we lost records. And that's in both my, because I also have BECMI campaign, which is pretty much pre-published. I've had to write a few modules here and there, but I'm using the MyStara campaign setting for that. Again, because my time's at a premium. I'm not lazy. I've written enough world settings on my own that nobody can accuse me of that. And I've even written them for Pathfinder First Edition, so there's a crunchy world setting for you. So whoever wants to just look at that, you're lazy because you're thinking lazy. You're not thinking about all the other things that might cause somebody to take a pre-published campaign and pre-published adventures to run the game. Everybody wants to play the game that's a gamer, period. And if you don't have the time to develop your own, then you use something somebody else put out there. And you're supporting your friendly local gaming store and your hobbyists that are professionals in this, the game designers, and ask anybody who's actually a name in game designing how tough a gig it is even for them. It's you're just being lazy in your thinking and judgmental, to be perfectly honest. So at any rate, that's my ramble and a little bit of a rant this time. I am a grognard to get crusty. So until next time, everybody, may all your hits be crits, and we'll see you on the table.